One of the things we as basketball fans love to do is to talk about the what-ifs, the players or scenarios that had the potential to go a certain way, but for one reason or another, they just didn't. Today, I want to talk about one of the most underrated what-ifs in NBA history, the tragic life of Roy Tarpley, and what could have been a Hall of Fame career. Roy Tarpley was born on November 28, 1964, in New York City. He played college ball at the University of Michigan from 1982 to 86. In 1985, Tarpley was named the Big Ten Player of the Year after leading the Wolverines to the Big Ten Championship. At 6'11", he was a rebounding and shot-blocking monster. He led Michigan in blocked shots in each of his 4 years, but he also led the team in scoring and rebounding every year besides his freshman season. He blocked 251 shots over the course of his Michigan career, the most in the school's history, but he also holds the record for the most blocks in a Michigan season with 97, and the most blocks in a game with 10. Tarpley was selected 7th overall by the Dallas Mavericks in the infamous 1986 draft, the draft that featured picks like Len Bias, Brad Daugherty, and Chris Washburn, who all had stunted careers, with Len Bias being the worst example, but more on that later. The 1980s Dallas Mavericks are one of the best teams to never win a championship. At this point, they had an amazing core of players, led by the high-scoring duo of Mark Aguirre and Rolando Blackman, underrated dynamic point guard Derek Harper, dual scoring and rebounding threat Sam Perkins, and other key pieces like James Donaldson, Brad Davis, and Detlef Schrempf. It only made sense for the Mavs to draft Tarpley. In 1986, the Mavs finished in the bottom half of the league in rebounds per game, but with Tarpley on the roster, the Mavs shot up from 15th place to 5th place in 1987. Tarpley was a starter in college, but for the Mavs, he was mostly utilized as a 6th man. In the 280 games he played in his NBA career, 223 of them were as a reserve off the bench. But what he was able to accomplish in that role is really impressive. Due to his incredible skills as a rebounder, Tarpley nabbed 81 double-doubles in those 223 games he came off the bench. That puts him 3rd all-time in double-doubles achieved by bench players, but Tarpley earned his double-doubles in substantially less games. The player with the second most double-doubles off the bench is Enes Freedom, who had 86 in 489 games as a reserve, and number 1 is Detlef Schrempf, who had 106 double-doubles in 612 games as a reserve. In those 57 games he did start, Tarpley managed to rack up 44 double-doubles as well. In his rookie season, Tarpley averaged 7.5 points and 7.1 rebounds in 18.6 minutes per game. He was named to the All-Rookie First Team, and the Mavs finished with 55 wins, their first 50-win season in franchise history. Their opponent in the first round of the playoffs were the Seattle Supersonics. For the series, Tarpley averaged 13.3 points and a series-leading 10.5 rebounds, mostly off the bench. After 15 minutes of play, Mavs center James Donaldson went down in Game 3 with an injury. Facing elimination in Game 4, Roy Tarpley got the start at center to replace Donaldson. Yeah, the Mavs got blown out 98-124, but Tarpley grabbed a game-high 17 rebounds. The future looked bright for the young power forward/center, but before the 87-88 season even began, Tarpley approached his team with shocking news. He told management and his teammates that he had a drug and alcohol problem. He wasn't necessarily addicted to his drug of choice at the time, which was cocaine, but Tarpley was worried that he could potentially become addicted. So, the 23-year-old underwent 6 weeks of rehab. It was a scary start to the year, but the 1987-88 season would end up being the best of Tarpley's career. Roy Tarpley was named the 1988 6th Man of the Year for averaging 13.5 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 1.1 blocks on 50% from the field. He won the award way ahead of the runner-up, the Utah Jazz's Thurl Bailey, who averaged just under 20 points per game. Tarpley finished first among all players in rebounding percentage, offensive rebounding percentage, and he was second in defensive rebounding percentage. He was even 4th in defensive rating. If you're unfamiliar with the rebounding percentage stat, it's a metric to measure the percentage of rebounds a player grabs while they're on the floor. Over Tarpley's first 4 seasons from 1987 to 90, he had a 21.2% rebounding percentage, the highest in the league during that time. In other words, he was the guy that got the rebound over the 9 other guys on the court 1 out of 5 times. Only 5 other players had a rebounding percentage of 18% during those years, including guys like Dennis Rodman, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Charles Barkley, and Tarpley crushed them all. That's how good of a rebounder he was. In the words of Kevin McHale, there were some guys that you had a hard time boxing out, there were some guys you couldn't box out. He was in the couldn't ranks. That guy was an offensive rebounding fool. The 1988 Mavericks made it all the way to the West Finals. In the first round versus the Rockets, Tarpley averaged 17.5 points and 10.8 rebounds. In the second round versus the Nuggets, he averaged 20.5 points and 14.2 rebounds. And in the West Finals versus the Lakers, he averaged 15.9 points and 13 rebounds, without starting a single game. The Mavs pushed the Lakers to 7 games in the West Finals, but the seasoned champions pulled ahead in the end. The 88-89 season would signal the beginning of the end for Tarpley's career, but not necessarily for the same reasons that really ruined his career. After just 4 games into the season, Tarpley injured his knee. He had to miss more than a month, but he did finally return to play 8 games for the Mavs, before he re-aggravated his knee injury. In total, Tarpley played just 19 games in 1989. After feuding with several players, as well as coach Dick Motta, the Mavs decided to trade star Mark Aguirre midway through the season to the Detroit Pistons. Aguirre went on to win a championship, and the Mavs finished with a 38-44 record. Now that the Mavs had a hole in their front court, Roy Tarpley was promoted to a starting role in the 89-90 season, but after playing the first 6 games of the season, Tarpley was arrested for driving while intoxicated and resisting arrest. He received a 2-month suspension by the NBA, leaving him only able to play the last 39 games of the regular season and the Mavs' 3 games in the postseason, where they were swept by the Portland Trail Blazers. After 5 games into the 90-91 season, Tarpley was arrested again for driving under the influence of alcohol, which resulted in the NBA banning him for life, but they did give him the opportunity to apply for reinstatement after 2 years. Now's a good time to go more in depth about the NBA's drug policy in the late 80s. NBA players had been using substances for years, and in the early and mid 80s, the culture around certain substances was much more free than it is now. If someone wanted to try a certain type of substance, all they had to do was ask. It was just seen as experimentation. People didn't think addiction was as serious as we do now. But after the tragic death of Len Bias on the 1986 draft night, that whole culture started to change. The NBA began cracking down hard on drug tests and substance abuse policies. That's why when Tarpley told the Mavs about his potential problem prior to the 88 season, they made it very clear with him. If he failed a test, he would be gone. Just like that. The players that first began to receive suspensions were players who had been doing hard drugs. Tarpley was the first player to be banned because of alcohol. Following his suspension, Tarpley played for 2 minor league basketball teams, the Wichita Falls Texans and the Miami Tropics. He then spent 2 years playing basketball overseas in the Greek Basket League. He was pretty successful in Greece, leading the league in rebounds in 1993, winning the Greek Cup in 1994, and in 2022, he was actually inducted into the Greek League Hall of Fame. Tarpley was able to get himself reinstated by the NBA for the 1994-95 season, and he made his return to the Dallas Mavericks at 30 years old. He was battling injuries all season, but Tarpley managed to play 55 games and put up 12.6 points and 8.2 rebounds. However, throughout his comeback season, Tarpley had frequently clashed with coach Dick Motta, and in November of 1995, the Mavericks actually suspended Tarpley before moving him to the injured list. The real gut punch, though, came in December of 95, when the NBA found out that Tarpley had been violating his aftercare program to help his alcohol addiction. This time, the NBA banned Tarpley for life, with no chance of reinstatement. In 2009, Tarpley sued the NBA and the Dallas Mavericks, claiming that their refusal to reinstate him violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. Tarpley was saying that his alcohol addiction was a disability. The suit was ultimately settled out of court. Tarpley passed away on January 9th, 2015, at the age of 50. Mark Aguirre had this to say about his late friend. He was a beautiful person with a really big heart. He was really talented. He had talent that you could not duplicate. Nobody could do what he could do. Before I left for Detroit, Roy was becoming our best player ever with me there. I could score, but I could not grab 20 rebounds like he could. He was becoming incredibly valuable.